What's up, guys? My name is Adrian. I own a company called the Alpus Project, which is a project all about bringing people to the conscious collective of community through inner work, shadow work, inner child healing, boundaries, whatever that is that allows you to find your truth and stay on the path of alignment, working towards your purpose in this life. I'm so excited to be a part of this. I love doing this episode today, and I can't wait for you guys to all hear it.
3, 2, 1.
There's so many different ways to go about it.
Same direction, but just different language. And language is just sound. Sound is frequency, it's vibration, it's resonance.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, when I meet somebody who's like in personal training and they're like, oh, I'm not spiritual, or somebody who is really into science and really into technology, but they're like, I'm not spiritual.
Yeah.
It's like, spirit is a technology. The sun is a technology. Everything around us has its own innate intelligence. Like my best friend, Bo, he's a chiropractor. We're saying the same thing.
We're saying the same thing.
We're saying the same
Truly,
thing.
yeah.
But he speaks in the body, in the very physical, very tangible. And for me, doing the work that I'm doing with relationships, which the energy that exists between two people, can't really see it. I mean, you can in their body language, but you don't see it the same way that a chiropractor sees bones, or, that personal trainers see muscles and
how it manifests, really.
How it manifests.
Everybody kind of just sees it in their own language, and then goes about treating it in the best way they can. But then in my experience, we all eventually kind of get to talking about the same things. It just takes us a few months, a few years, a few decades to finally realize we've been saying the same thing this whole time. We just see it in different ways. We express it in different ways. We see it in other people in different ways. And it's just, how long are we going to go about choosing to not try to speak other languages, to meet people where they are and to kind of, fill the gaps and vice versa.
Yeah. And that's important in friendships where you have people coming from so many different places. Like, it's one thing when you have your friendships from your hometown, you all grew up with the same language, but then you crave culture, you crave something different because that resonance might not exist. So two people can say the exact same concept to you, but the verbiage that they use and the way that they carry themselves, and also the undercurrent of why they're speaking to you about what they're speaking to you. If you feel an agenda with it, you could be having somebody telling you something that is prime information for you, but there's going to be something in your field that goes, I do not want to listen to that.
Yeah.
That feels like they want something from me.
Right.
And so the language is so important, and being able to allow people to replace vocabulary that has come with a long history of making them feel a certain type of way. Right, just like that frequency that a certain word carries, and it holds, and who builds that frequency? It's typically a society of people who have continued to say things about a certain word, like God is a great example.
Built a norm around it.
Yes, or fitness, or anything that we've heard over and over and over again. And then you come to a point in your life where you're like, what does this word even mean to me? I've never thought about that. And then starts, an unraveling process. So it is like what you were saying is, why are we fighting it? We're like, this is the only language that exists. And you're trying to find that resonance for yourself. You're like, I need to feel connected to something greater than just me or what I'm lacking. And then you meet somebody that holds themselves a certain way. They say the same sentence your parents have been saying forever, or whoever has been saying. And all of a sudden, like, you feel safe with them. It
just hits differently. It lands differently. It finally kind of makes sense in a way.
Reciprocity hits better than anything else hits. And when you feel that with a person, like, I'm offering you information. I have absolutely no attachment to how you receive it. I don't need to be the one that delivered it to you, and I don't need anything to come of it. And whether or not you agree with it, my offering of it was really clean. And when you feel that, you feel that reciprocity, like, oh, this person's offering me a gift with nothing attached to it, that's going to hit harder than anything else can.
Because that I would assume challenges the most for people. It's, how can I receive something like this that makes so much sense, that feeds me in a way, but at the same time you don't want anything out of it. You're not taking at the same time that you're giving.
Yeah.
Is that kind of, you think, is that the ultimate goal that everybody needs to be getting to, should be getting to, or even like how do we get to that point of giving in a way that connects with people and lands in a way that we can not have an attachment to, not have an expectation to receive anything back from.
Yeah, and that's a huge shadow that I've had to work on as like a healer or somebody that's in a coaching business. And I've always been like, I've always had this like coaching energy about me. Like I want to learn something and tell everybody about it. And you know, you're just naturally drawn to the things you're drawn to. And then later you do your human design and you find out like, oh, I'm a generator. And, you know, my whole thing is like, I like to experiment with the world and then teach it. And whatever reason that's leading you to that. For me, it's just offering information to like my clients or to my friends and my family. And a great example of this is when I went on my healing journey and really got into depth about what am I really trying to heal? Like, what is that whole journey that everyone's talking about?
Yeah, what do you mean by healing journey?
Yeah, just like and that's the thing. Like the word healing can have like a negative kind of vibe to it. It's like, well, what is something wrong with me? Or like, I had a great childhood. And for me, the word healing is also just interchangeable with like shedding. You know, if I bring all of these things with me from my past, from society, and I don't resonate with them, I will continue to compromise on the things that I do resonate with because I have stories about how what I do resonate with is incorrect, it's wrong, it's not, you know, it's going to lead people to leave me, the people that I love. Or if I go find my resonance and it no longer resonates with the people that I love, I will have to choose.
Right.
And so that healing process is, how do I become really honest with myself about the things that are not in resonance with me?
Okay.
And then how do I become aware of the fear that comes with claiming the resonance, knowing that the people that I'm codependent with, the people that have made me feel good about myself, that have validated me, that have been there for me, might not be okay with what resonates with me any longer. And then I will be abandoned. So it's like you're trying to move forward, but we have stories about how if I move forward, if I go do this thing, like I will be left behind or I'll have to leave people behind. That was the big one for me.
It's like, is the reward I'm seeking worth the sacrifice I think is going to come with it?
Right.
Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. And being able to discern that, like, you're not going to know it until you continue to do the work of seeing, like, why is this so important to me? If you know that you want something, but you don't have like a really clear understanding of why and what it's really worth, then you're ultimately like, you're not going to go for that thing. And a good example, we were just talking about this weekend. There was a man that ended up like losing his whole life, his wife, everything. He was searching for this like treasure in the sea. He was a scuba diver, like looking for treasures for like 12 years. And everybody knows, like, he lost all his money, pretty much gambled it all away. And everyone's like, you know,
what are you chasing?
Yeah,
like, give up already.
Yeah. And, you know, he ended up finding it. And I think it was some crazy number, like in the millions, close to billions, like 500 million.
Way, wow.
And it's a famous story, and I'm probably butchering it. So like, go do your own checking of it.
I love me a good pirate story.
Yeah. And the reason it came up is because one of my favorite movies with Matthew McConaughey is called Fool's Gold.
And
I'm pretty sure that that's the story. Whether they're connected, I'm pretty sure it's the story.
With Kate Hudson, right?
Yes, Kate Hudson. Yeah. And just like the process of like, you have to really, and he says, like, what are the three things, or what are the things that you have to do in order to like accomplish this, right? Manifestation works the same way. It's like, you have to be fucking sure, not only that it exists, but that it's worth sacrificing anything and everything that might come on the process to that. And then you just have to have faith in yourself to do it, which is like, that sounds really simple.
Yeah, it's all you got to do.
The healing process is doing the work that it takes to figure out just how important things are to you, to understand what you're willing to sacrifice, and to create space to call in and make room for the things that are in more alignment, and trust that if something is in alignment, but it's not quite as in alignment as what you really want, that it's not that you have to sacrifice a person, but to say, you know, in a relationship, like, oh man, I really, really like you, and I'm experiencing all these beautiful things with you, but I'm also have this idea of what I really want, and I feel like if I let go of you, maybe I won't get it at all. You know, and then just constantly doing the work to be like, wow, why do I feel like the universe is only going to be like, yeah, you know, you deserve 80% of what you want.
Which I'm sure someone listening right now really, like, that hit home for them. Like, oftentimes I can think back, even when I felt like I was, like, I earned things, almost even to a point of like, maybe even deserve them. Even part of me would feel like not the full 100%. Like I'm like not worthy of it, or I'm not supposed to be the one to get it all, or I'm only like getting like close to the full kind of reward for my works.
Yeah, or just waiting for the ball to drop.
Even more so.
Yeah.
Like, this is too good to be true. You know, where's the sacrifice?
And like, talk about a healing journey. I feel like what is most like palatable for people to understand is real examples, and where a lot of this ties in, and where I was actually talking about like the fool's gold and like going after the treasure is, I have a really interesting relationship dynamic with two men, and the healing work that I have had to do, not even to just to be in the scenario that I'm in, because that's complicated enough as it is. One relationship is complicated enough. Like, your relationship with yourself and who you are and your boundaries and how you interpret the world, that's one whole experience. And then you add another person in, and then you're both doing healing work. You know, you're both living in truth, not kind of slipping into the like, I'm not going to say the thing that I know you don't want me to say, but you don't say the shit that I know want you to say to me, and we'll just
let's just lie and dance around each other.
Yeah, let's just completely and totally lie and have these codependent ways that we move our energy. And to be able to like really receive both of these people, and to come to that place where I feel like I have this healthy relationship with the masculine, with the men that are entering my lives, as well as if you don't have a healthy relationship with the feminine, you don't have a healthy relationship with the masculine, and vice versa. Like, they're two halves of a whole.
Can you break that down a little bit more for us?
Yeah.
Because that concept is it's relatively new for me, I'll say, or at least I understand it, but just really how to break it down and separate the two is new content for me, or is new work for me, I should say.
Yeah.
And also for the listener. This is brand new to EF Airwaves. So
that.
please, share us.
And I will
more.
preface by saying that I am going to speak about the masculine and the feminine from my raw interpretation, my experience, like my engagement with that. It's not going to come from any books. So it's, I think, you know, the way that I relate to that energy is the same as like yin and yang, light and shadow, like masculine, feminine, creator, performer, right? Certainty and uncertainty, chaos and structure. Like, they all represent the same, again, same direction, different language. Or we're all talking about duality. We're all talking about where everything begins and ends, and the way that it folds into itself, and how really the way that I believe that we exist in this reality is on a spectrum.
Okay.
And that means that everything is truth. It's just relative to the person who is experiencing it. And so when you have this broad spectrum, the masculine on one end, the feminine on one end, or the performer on one end, or the creator on the other end, it's not like we're half and half. You know, you say like, this isn't about male and female. This is about yin yang theory. This is about the universe and the two halves and all of that exists in between, in the in-between space. And really just not needing it to be like, well, you're the masculine and I'm the feminine. Or like, say you're in a relationship and it's like has to be 50-50, or
it doesn't have to be this equal divide in order to be whole.
And in order for it to be whole and to really be fluid, there isn't this like, this takes up this much and this takes up this much. It's a dance. It's moving in between the space. So for me, identifying with the masculine, there are certain traits that the masculine represents, like the structure. If you read any of like David Deda's work, like The Way of the Superior Man, Dear Lover, you know, that gives a lot of context for kind of the energetics behind masculine and feminine in the context of sex, mostly.
I just got that book actually last week, The Way of the Superior Man.
Yeah.
Finally, it's been on my list for a long time.
Yeah. And the way that I see the feminine is very much like the way that I see the entire earth. And I've heard people talk about this a lot. You know, the feminine energy, it's not just the mountains and the waterfalls and the butterflies and the flowers.
All the typical things we probably think of or assume, right? Yeah.
It's also the jaguars that eat other animals alive. You know what I mean? And the sandstorms and lighting itself on fire.
Power.
And the lightning that strikes the tree and burns the entire forest. It's all of that. It's every emotion, every expression. And then the masculine really represents that polarity of it, which is just the intense presence that holds the space for the experience.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when you talk about like holding space for someone, a good space holder is somebody who is able to reach a level of neutrality because in their presence, like they're able to stand in the moment and and be unmoved by your experience. They don't even just like we have practices when I do retreats with my clients where when we're holding space, no even shaking your head. Like you are really letting the person across from you that has something to say share from a place of pure expression. Because what happens is, as humans, we are looking for that validation. So you'll see this happening where you're either agreeing with something before you've even tasted it. Like, how do I actually resonate with that? Right? So you're susceptible to being moved. And if you're susceptible to being moved by the energy that another person is saying, you can't hold space. You're in the experience with them. You're having your own experience, right? And on the other side of that is, you know, if I say something and you're shaking your head, I'm receiving feedback that the direction that we're going, I'm moving that direction. And if I don't like the direction that it's going, I'm noticing that your feedback is not matching up with the validation I would really like to receive. And I'm going to shift the way that I'm moving my energy.
I'm trying so hard to not nod my head now that you say it. It's like in my head. I'm like, but it's, again, to your point earlier, it's kind of like, what are these things that we've just grown to accept to be the norm, or how we're supposed to interact, or, you know, that in and of itself is a contribution to how you may or may not navigate the conversation. It's whether I really am agreeing with you or feel any kind of way. I have these little cues, little facial expressions, or nodding my head, or I'm not the only one. Everybody does this.
Everybody.
But I've never really paused to think enough about how that actually could be leading to you choosing to go one way or another. We're all feeding off of these kind of cues, consciously or subconsciously.
And so say that I'm, you know, in an experience where I need you as my partner, as my friend, to really hold space for me. And you start really shifting the way that you're giving me feedback through your body language. And then I start shifting. Whereas if you really think about, if you're holding the space and you are being neutral, you're holding the space for someone else to fully experience themselves. So what you do is you hold a presence where you're not going to give them anything to experience about you. That's very hard to do.
Wow.
But if you can do that, you will watch people unfold themselves. And that, you know, an aggressive way that I can explain this is I've seen this happen before where someone is yelling, right? They're screaming at you. And typically that frequency that they're bringing will create a frequency match inside of you. And then you'll either, you know, fight or flight, like whatever that experience is. If you start yelling back, you're passing that energy back and forth. But if somebody starts screaming at you, and let's say that you weren't actually paying attention, you didn't even know they were screaming at you, it would be like silence after that.
Yeah.
That energy would echo. And all of a sudden, that person, they're going to feel themselves. But if you caught that energy and then you threw it back at them, they're not experiencing themselves. They're experiencing you experiencing them. And it's a very different experience. So it's really beautiful to be able to, like in my friendships and like in my partnerships, really sit. And the person I'm doing, you know, my partnership dance with right now, and that I think is going to be my person for a very long time. He's a salesman. He's a nice little salesman, and he's smooth and he's creamy and he has deep people pleasing. And so in the beginning of our relationship, it's safe to say like there was lies. And these weren't like malicious lies. You know, he wasn't cheating on me, he wasn't doing things, but he was living the version of himself that he thought I wanted.
Okay.
So I could feel that he was not in truth. Like when I said, hey, like we've been doing this dance for a while, I'm having a really good time, I really like this. Like, would you want to move in with me? And his thing is like, I really love this woman. I want to build a life with her. And instead of saying, oh man, I love the idea of that in the future, for some reason, that does not feel safe to me. That my inner child, like that makes me feel whatever that feeling is, right? Inadequate. It makes me feel like, you know, that's a lot of commitment. It's rubbing up against something that I am not feeling safe to do. So what I would like to do is like ask for more time. Can you be patient? We don't really communicate like that as a society, you know, because what's happening is he's afraid that if he says, oh man, like I want that, but I can tell in my truth
if
that I'm
I
not
say
ready.
my truth, it's going to come across the wrong way. It's going to
Yep.
push her away, and
She's going to go ask some other guy. It's going to turn into this whole thing. And so then all of a sudden, like I start seeing little weird, red flags of things. Like when I get the application that, he's applied to be on my house because I rent, it's like one of the phone numbers was missing. And little things where it's like energetically, this person's not all in. Otherwise it wouldn't be showing up like that. And I know that from just how messy things show up in my life. Like our reality is constantly being manifested by us. And if you have contradiction in your field, it's going to show up. It's going to show up in the in-between spaces. Like I'm filling out this application and there's a part of me that's like, I don't really know if I want to do this. Like, so it's like you're not present in the process. Whereas if you were so stoked, like you're going to double check, make sure that application is getting there because it's what you want more than anything. But it's not. And so having that, like having, saying like, hey, I see these things are showing up. And it's just beautiful to be able to witness people in that space. And with him, there was a conversation that happened after that where I was like, it's hard. At this point, it's hard for me to trust you because there's a lot of things that showed up where there was dishonesty where
I can imagine.
I was like, okay.
You probably began to kind of look deeper and see more clearly.
Saw it everywhere. Yeah. And so he came over to my house for a conversation. And I was like, I'm not going to give you any verbal or physical feedback. Like my body is going to be a vessel of nothingness. And it was so hard to do because
just stoic.
Like so stoic. And so I sit there and I'm like, this is my face. This is going to be my face for the entirety of this conversation. And what was such a gift was that he had never got to experience the truth of himself either because he doesn't know he's constantly looking for feedback. We are so unaware of how we are looking to see, like, am I being worthy enough? Like, is this okay? Like, am I making people happy? Like, am I doing the right thing? And so when I sat there, I watched multiple iterations of him looking for feedback. And the first bit of it started as like, oh, like if this certain thing didn't happen in my life, like I would be ready for you, which like, that's not true. If you're not ready, you're not ready. Like there is no other truth, right? And then when I just held firm to like that idea of like, yeah, like me too. No, just like completely stoic. And then it switched over to like, well, if I just had this in my life, and then he started crying at one point.
So he's just going through layer after layer after layer.
Layer after layer after layer.
Of probably a lot of the lies and half-truths he was telling himself.
Yes.
But you open up this space to for him to probably get it out and to realize, no, that's not true. Let me go to the next layer. No, that's not true. Let me go to the next layer.
Because if something is truth, you don't need another person to believe you. You do. If you are so grounded, so present in your experience, it's like, man, like even if I wish this wasn't my truth, but like this is my truth and I'm telling it to you and there's literally nothing that you can say that's going to shift me out of it. And having that level of like commitment to your own truth, like that to me, that's what everyone's purpose is here, is just to follow that path, to find your internal compass, and no matter what you like or don't like about it, or whatever stories you have, stay true to it so that you can really embody that truth and be in such deep resonance with yourself that everyone that's supposed to resonate with you, that is, by the way, only resonating with you because they're looking for deeper resonance. Like you're going to attract those people from across the world. And in this scenario, watching him go through these iterations, like he realized none of the things he was saying were true. He was just looking for certain feedback from me to say like, okay, she does still love me. And even though I fucked up, I didn't fuck up so much that it's not even, we're not even good. So he's looking for the specific outcome. And he's looking by like nonverbal communication and the smallest cues and body language and like inflection in my voice. And when he didn't get any of that, you get down to this truth. And at the time we had actually broken up, we were like, okay, like some of the lies and the things that are happening, again, like you compromising on your truth, and it's all people pleasing stuff. You saying yes to me or overcommitting to certain things or overextending yourself, like something as small as like, I'm going to bring smoothies to the park for everybody in the morning, and then showing up without smoothies. Just don't fucking say you're bringing smoothies. Nobody even cares about the smoothies. Yeah,
that was an unnecessary, offer.
Yeah, and then it comes down to like, why do you not feel like you're enough just showing up exactly as you are? Why do you feel that you showing up, you have to bring something in order for people to feel your value? And if that is your root belief, you're going to continue to overextend yourself, make promises that you can't keep, because instead of being like, oh, I just want to be somebody that's really impeccable with my word, actually what I'm experiencing is I want you to perceive that I'm impeccable with my word more than I actually want to be, which means I am not grounded in who I am. I am finding my grounding and my validation from who you think I am or who I think you think I am. And like,
what's that quote? Who says that? It's, I'm not who I think I am who I think you think I am.
Yeah.
Is it Ruhi? Is that the,
I don't know.
I'm going to have to look that up.
I know Eckhart Tolle talks about the concept of the longer that you know someone, typically the less in truth you actually are with them, because it's like, I perceive that you perceive me a certain way, and I perceive that you perceive that I perceive you a certain way. And it's like, how far away have we even gotten from like, oh, we've been married for 25 years. And by the way, I've changed every single day, but I've never mentioned any of the things I've done to change because I know that you love me the way that I was 25 years ago. And what I've done now is I've locked myself and you in a time capsule in an evolving world. And I'm, 25 years away from like that evolving truth that is, by the way, constantly changing, always in a different level of relativity. And it's tricky. And so in a relationship, when I'm sitting here having this conversation with him and I'm like, the data that I have about you is that the things that you've said in the past were not in truth. You weren't maliciously lying, but you were saying things that you thought I wanted to hear. That's not safe for me because sometimes I'm in an experience, and what I think I want, I don't always need to get that thing. I need like the presence of the masculine to watch me go through whatever the self-destruction cycle is, and then at the end, what can I do for you? And what can I do for you that does not take me out of my center? Mm-hmm. How can I show up for you in a way that does not unground me? Like that is what, that dance between the masculine and the feminine. If one person is really in an experience, it's not like, it's always the woman. It's not. My partner's in an experience on a regular basis, right? And a lot of times we're in the experience together. So then you can have integrity and come to the realization of like, as much as I want to hold space for you, I can't. I'm in a full-blown experience. And there's no way that I can unbiasedly sit here and listen to you. And this is something, like I said, I have a really interesting dynamic with all my friends. My ex-partner that I was with for 3 years, he's one of my best friends. He's good friends now with all my guy friends, including like the two guys that I have a very intimate relationship with. And with all of us, like those conversations are always moving. And with my ex, there are certain things that I was never able to hold space for him for, which is why I was not a good partner for him, and vice versa. And still to this day, we love each other so much. And there are certain situations that he is in his life and experiences that he has. I don't know why, but I can't be neutral. I'm so fucking triggered by them. Like especially if like he has someone in his life that doesn't treat him the way that I think he should be treated. And I'm hearing a story about that. Instead of just being able to be like, okay, like I trust that this person has everything they need to figure it out, and I'm just gonna sit here and listen to them. And like that conversation where someone kind of like tells you a bunch of things, but you don't feel heavy afterwards. You're like, yeah, like I know they're gonna figure it out. It's like if Tony Robbins was telling you about his shitty day, you would be like, oh man, like thanks for sharing that. I relate to that, and like like I experience downers sometimes too. But at no point are you gonna be like, I have to help Tony. Like I am responsible for rescuing. Exactly. Yeah. So when you're that close to someone, and when you have that much codependency, and when the masculine and the feminine don't have very clear, fluid, like motions that they're moving through, or like, when you're stepping in and holding space, and when you're the one having the experience and you're able to communicate openly, if you don't have that, then codependency just kind of fills in.
But do you ever worry and, or I guess follow-up question is like, how do you know the difference between that's maybe what you want versus this is what that person truly needs? Like to take yourself out of the equation because this other person so well. Like, no, I know that this is not in alignment with you and what you need versus I just don't want that for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like if somebody is saying like, hey, I'm in this relationship with this new person, and you're like, that person sucks. Like that's how I feel about that person.
Are you sure you want to be dating them? Or I've known people even after they get engaged and ready to get married, they're like a couple weeks or months before the wedding. Are you sure you want to marry her? Are you sure you want to marry him? It's them stepping in and less of them knowing that this is just not in alignment for you.
And I think for that ties in beautifully with like the masculine and the feminine. I need to know if I'm going to speak about something, I need to feel really grounded about it.
Okay.
And this is where integrity comes in. So where I step into my masculine role is, let's say that you decide to get into a relationship or a friendship or a business partnership with someone, and as soon as you tell me, the first thought is like, oh, I fucking hate that person. Like, that person sucks. That person fucked this other person over that I know. And like, immediately I'm in an experience.
Which happens for all of us.
Yes. If I'm in that type of an experience, from an integrity standpoint, I'm deeply in a feminine experience. I am in the middle of the experience, and anything that I say is not going to be grounded. And in that moment, I would say, I do not feel like I'm the right person to have this conversation.
Okay.
And I would set a boundary. I would say, like, as much as I want to talk to you about this, like, that's not a conversation I'm available for.
Okay.
And this is really hard because nobody is used to saying, like, hey, I'm not available for this. Hey, like, I'm not available for this.
Yeah, who says that?
Yeah. And I say it all the time, and like, my friends, they giggle and they like they make jokes about it because it's like, who the fuck says that? But if you say to me, hey, I'm going into partnership with this person, and I, knew that person 5 years ago. I knew that person, the way that they showed up with me, I didn't really appreciate that. I didn't feel respected. I do believe people change. This person had great qualities about them. My personal experience 5 years ago left such a bad taste in my mouth that I would not want to do business with them right now. But, my advice to you would be, like, follow your heart. And if your intuition is really pulling you there, like, you can see the difference between how grounded I sound with that. It sounds like I've had some time to not be in the experience.
It has some neutrality to it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It's like I have kind of tasted it. I've been in my experience. I've held space for myself in my experience. So I'm coming from this like divine masculine space, which is that I hear what you're saying. All I'm going to do is reflect back to you what you're telling me, like, oh, I want to get in a partnership with this person because I feel like they're this, this, and this. And then also there's a level of accountability that I will hold. And if I have information that I feel is relevant for you, but it's not like I'm pushing this information, I'm attached to the way that you're going to receive this information and I need to be right. If there's that, again, you can see that agenda, you can feel that energy, and that is not going to be welcomed by you anyways. If you ever have somebody that's like, dude, fuck that person, like, don't even, immediately, you're not like, oh, you know what, I feel so safe with you. It's like, how your relationship, and it goes back, like how you have a relationship with one male, at the end of the day, that transfers to everyone. So your relationship with the masculine, my relationship with that guy that fucked me over, a year ago, that I feel was a narcissist, whatever I'm holding for that person, my future partner will feel it. My current partner will feel it. And the same thing with the feminine, and whatever you're holding for your parents, that will be felt by your partner. This generational trauma that we have, and these things that were not just passed down, from our parents and our families and the stories and like the information stored in ourselves, but also whatever we came with, like shedding of that process, healing that process, so that when you're sitting down and you're having a conversation with someone at a high level and you're saying like, hey, I'm doing big shit in my life. Like, I really want to serve people and I'm thinking about going into business with this other person. Like, what do you think of them? I know you had an experience with them 6 years ago. You're in your healing experience where you've gotten to a place where you're able to trust another person to collaborate with them. And hopefully I'm in my healing experience where if I did collaborate with them in the past, or I know something about them, I've come to a neutral place. I've processed whatever I experience, and I'm able to speak to you from a very grounded place, which is the only time that we're really in integrity, when we're speaking.
Sure.
So that's kind of where a lot of that ties into, is like your own internal masculine and feminine. And for me, the feminine, the flow, the creator, like all of that, like I don't make decisions from that place. I create from that place.
Okay.
Like I dance, I taste, I experience, like I'm in it. And then when it's time for that whole creative process of which is, by the way, everything in between, everything that you could possibly experience, every breath, every emotion, every single way that you see it, right? Like think of like the moon phases, which is like representative of the feminine. It's constantly changing and shifting, whereas the sun is the sun.
Yeah.
The sun is the masculine, the moon is the feminine, like whatever other language you want to throw in there. And one of the reasons why I throw so much of the language is some people are very triggered by certain words. Right?
Yeah.
Some people are not grounded yet in the experience that the idea of a word means to them. And so when they hear that word, it triggers a response. They're in their experience. They're in their feminine. Yeah. They're experiencing it. And then, as you continue to do the healing work, which is the work of understanding, why are you in an experience about something that is neutral?
Truly.
Why are you in an experience? When you can come to the level of self-awareness and the self-acknowledgement. Acknowledgement's super important. Then you get to a place where you can truly hold divine masculine space of, I could have any truth in the world about a scenario. If a guy cheated on me, my truth could be like, he's a narcissist, he's a piece of shit. Or the person was suffering and they didn't feel safe to be in truth with me. And my boundaries is I'm not available for someone who's not safe to be in truth with me. That's very grounded. That's taken some time to no longer be in the experience and in the reaction, and to have stepped far enough back, which is kind of like what I feel like when I'm in my divine masculine space. It's a bird's eye view. When I'm in the feminine, I'm dropped into the middle of the jungle, you know, and I'm like fucking fighting for my grounding, my life, what is going on? Like, am I going to be, you know, eaten alive? What's happening? Yeah. And then, you know, the divine masculine is up there just kind of watching and there to like really hold that space and to provide that grounding.
What you're hitting on is so true for me as of late. One of the realizations I've had of many is that the more that I work on the relationship with myself, and by that I mean just understanding myself, understanding who I am today, the kind of man I want to show up to be in my life, in my business, in my friendships, in my marriage, really means looking at what led up to this moment. You know, what are all the limiting beliefs, all the thoughts, the past, the experiences, the nature and the nurture that got me to this point, and what do I hold to be true? What do I want to question, and what do I want to carry with me? Because I've really kind of accepted, but more so decided, like, I want to create this truth and identity for myself. I want to pull from what I like and what I feel serves me and stay in the work to then create me and everything that I want. And I've noticed that the more that I work on that, the more things that come up out of that directly helps my relationships with other people.
Absolutely.
Because I will see things that will just really, really remind me of they're probably going through something very similar to me, and this is the experience that I had. So it allows more space for grace. It allows more space for understanding. So my question for you is, how can we directly kind of work, and we go through the journey, the healing journey, how can we directly begin to take the relationship and the work with ourselves to apply to the relationship with other people? Or do you think they kind of just go hand in hand?
Yeah, I do think that one way or the other, you are going to find yourself. Either you're going to find, you know, who you are and kind of start loving yourself and creating really harsh boundaries with the outside world. And then over time, that love will start to bleed on others, right? And you'll start to be like, oh, like this person's kind of similar to me. They're going through it. Or it's the opposite. Like they're self-loathing, but then you start to love pieces of the world. And then as you start to love more pieces of the world, you meet people that have things about you that you hate, that you find endearing in them. And then you eventually, you know, you're doing that dance. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. And I think that when you're looking at doing the work, it's one, eliminating ambiguity. So just even the idea of like, what does it mean to do inner work? Creating as much clarity as you can about, it's like data collection on yourself. It's like, if there's something in your life that you don't vibe with, if there's someone in your life that you don't vibe with, if there's a scenario that you wish was different, you can start asking yourself, okay, well, I'll make it different, or I won't do it. But then as soon as you say that, there's another layer underneath that that's like, well, but I have to. So then you just ask yourself, well, why do I have to? Right? And it's like, you know, the game of like, you know, when children are just like, they ask a question and you think they're done, and then they just like, but why?
Why?
And you're like, because it has to be that way. And they're like, but why? And you're like, well, that's what the system says. Well, but why? And it's like, okay.
Maybe kids are onto something there,
maybe
actually.
Kids are onto something. And getting really curious about yourself in that way. And by the way, I feel like, you know, curiosity is the only way to make it out of shadow work and inner work alive. Like, it's the only way, because otherwise you're going to be chasing plant medicine. You're going to be chasing like information. You're going to be chasing God, and it's always going to be outside of yourself. That is literally the contradiction to inner work. Like, I have to do my inner work. Okay, ayahuasca. Okay, this person, this relationship. Like, I got to figure out why this is hard. I got to change jobs. I got to change cities. I got to da-da-da-da-da. Like, everything's so external.
Right, yeah. Good point.
The whole point was inner work.
Yeah.
You know, and so that feeling of right out of the gate, when you think about healing, there's obviously a reason why you're attracted to that idea. And for most people, it's this ego thing. It's like, I have patterns in my relationship that cause me to lose the people I love.
This feeling of like, I want to fix something or all the things.
Yeah. And we're very addicted to that. It's like, it's up and coming. Like, spirituality is like a hot topic right now. Like everybody's talking about being woke, being conscious. It's the next big wave of everything. And then you'll find spiritual narcissism and materialism and everything's in it. We all have it, right? And like
that's so true.
Yeah, and it's like just again getting so curious about you are not just one thing. You're not just the sun. You are the sun. You're also the earth. You're not just the waterfalls. You're not just the rainbows. You're not just, the rainforest. You're also the animals in there that kill other animals. You're thieves. You're liars. You're adulterers. You're all the things that exist in this place. Like, you're an entire ecosystem. You are as much innate intelligence as the oceans. The sharks that clean the oceans and like everything that's happening. And like you look at what's going on with the earth and like how trashed it is. It's a direct representation of what is going on inside of us as a society and humans. Our own emotional baggage and how it is being manifested in the world around us. And so you can start looking at like, well, what is my emotional baggage? Like, if you ask yourself that, one of two things is going to happen. Like, you're either going to be like, oh, it's like this thing I already knew about. And it's like, it's pretty simple. I'm kind of already on my way to working it. Or you know what it is, but it's behind a really heavy door. And all you can see is a door, and you're like, no, I'll do any other inner work. Like,
how many of us can relate to that? I'm sure everybody's nodding their head now on that one.
It's so funny because I get congratulated or like, oh, Adrian, like you just do the work, and I'm so inspired by it. And it's like, you want to know what my fucking dark, heavy door with a box locked inside is? It's my dad's death that happened 6 years ago. Well, yeah, because like the inner work looks so different on every single person.
Right,
like,
right, yeah.
Somebody with rejection wounds, like what were we talking about? Is like, I was with my friend Andreas yesterday, and we were doing like longboarding, and we were talking about in Sedona, we had this experience where I had asked Kyle Kingsbury if I could come sit in and listen to a podcast he was doing. And it was back when he was doing it for Human Optimization for On It.
Right,
and his guest was Andrew Huberman. And so that was the first time I met Andrew.
Amazing.
Super amazing.
Wow.
So it was like such a cool experience, I didn't even know the guy's name when I showed up to the podcast. I was like, I just want to sit on a podcast because I always listen to the podcast.
Huberman Lab.
Yeah,
amazing.
Shout out to Andrew. He is incredible. So I'm sitting in there, and then I get done, and Andreas is working out On It's gym, and he's like, "How did you get in there?" And I was like, "I just asked." And he's like, "That was we were talking about this yesterday. That was such a big lesson for him because he's the kind of person that's like, I don't want to burden you, So talk about polarity, entitlement, which is where I come from. I don't know what no means. My parents never told me no. No is like a foreign thing to me, and I have a hard time hearing it. So I've had to do a lot of inner work on not completely bulldozing over people. My partners, when they say no, it's like, okay, well, it's no right now, but I'll just figure out a way to manipulate you into getting the answer that I want, which is a yes.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And on his end, polarity. Like, I'm not worthy of asking for this. The opposite of that entitlement, feeling like he's not entitled to anything, including happiness or asking for what he wants. So his inner work looks very different than my inner work. It's not the same. That's why you can't just go out and we're all doing the same thing, or, like you're finding resonance. That's why it's important for you to find people that have language that feels similar to you. You can relate to that. You're listening to their stories and you're going, that's a situation I can find myself in. I really relate to the way that person did the problem solving aspect of that situation. And so for me, with my whole journey, it's been really easy for me to dive into plant medicine work. It's been, my open relationship work that I did. I was in an open relationship for about a year, and I'm back in one right now. And that work for me doesn't seem to be that difficult. And when I go into like 4 grams of psilocybin ceremony, being really intentional, looking for something, I can find all sorts of things that I need to do work on, all sorts of things. And I'm like, I'm excited to be there. And there's the one thing that it doesn't matter if it's 4 grams of mushrooms. It doesn't matter if it's, if I'm just doing a full tab of LSD one day while I'm at the beach. The box that doesn't want to open and isn't going to open is the my dad died box, because I don't want to open that. There's a part of me that's like, oh, no, wait. I'm down to do the inner work, just not that inner work. So that's been this kind of what I've been striving for, is not to fix that or to do that healing, but to find a space within myself where I feel safe enough to open the box and to say, whatever is in this box, we feel and I say we, I'm like talking about me and my multiple personalities, or like, me and all the versions of myself that are hiding me from that. Like, no, I'm going to protect you from this. Like, you don't want to open that. That wouldn't be good for us. And that feeling, where does that information come from? Like, will it make me unstable? Or like, if I start crying now, I'll never stop. It's like, I have a story that I can't even get to quite yet about what it would mean for me to open that box. And the story that I would assume is something along the lines of, like, I can't hold space for how fucking sad I am about it. Like, the level of grief that I feel about losing my dad is something that I can't even cope with it. And I definitely do not, if I don't feel like I can handle it, I definitely am not going to let someone else hold space for me. So there's that interesting aspect of, on my way to doing this inner work that I am committed to doing.
We have a special guest appearance
about my
here.
dad, I've been finding so much other inner work. So I'm not fixated on this one thing that's like, plant medicine until I find it. I'm going to do it. I'm going after it. It's like that aggressive need to fix something, that in and of itself, that attachment needs healing. So what I'm doing is I'm finding that neutrality too, in that divine masculine that's like holding myself accountable. Hey, this is something that I do want to work on. And if I find myself kind of like sitting it on the back burner, I'm going to recommit to it. But at the same time, I'm not going to spend my entire life like, this is the direction that I'm going, and I can't get mistaked on the path, like, this has to be where it is. And so the space in that polarity for me is really just committing to, the journey of doing my healing work. If anything that I know is keeping me, and the healing work is anything at all that's keeping you from fully opening your heart and embracing life in a receptive way. If you can't experience reciprocity with someone because you only know how to give and not receive, also you don't know how to give. Because you're giving with the intent that at some point it will return to you, or that you're giving because the only thing you feel worthy of doing is giving. Both of those things have dirty undercurrents.
For damn sure.
So reciprocity is like, are you able to be in receptivity while you're in a giving state at all times? So that process of me being in that giving to like my relationship with my father, now that he's passed, and like still keeping his spirit alive and being open to beautiful things in the world that remind me of him, so that I can feel really connected and moved, and really, having the boundaries of like having an environment that supports. If I do feel moved by something in that space, I have the space and the environment to support that box opening for myself. And if you have a box that needs to be opened, and every single day it's work, get home from work, smoke a bowl of weed, watch TV, listen to another podcast, wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, boom, 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 boom.
Wash, rinse, repeat.
You do not have the space. And so the healing work that you want to do, and maybe that repetitive pattern that keeps showing up in your relationship that is sabotaging your ability to really connect with that person, which is all you're really here for, just to feel deep connection and resonance and love and experience, right?
100%.
If you're blocked in that way, and the thing that is blocking you is something you're unaware of, and you don't have the space to become aware, like, you're the one perpetuating that cycle. And so at any point, you can step into your divine masculine role, take a bird's eye view, and go, oh shit, this is a cycle. I'm in a loop. And the loop continues the loop. So what do I do?
Feeds itself,
I create a disturbance in the loop. Like, that's the power that we have over our own energy. Self-mastery is not about mastering something external. It's about mastering the way that we hold ourselves and how we feel centered and how we speak. How grounded can I be in the way that I interpret energy that I'm engaging with? And how grounded can I be when I go to speak that truth to another person, regardless of their experience with it? And if they do have an experience, how grounded can I be to hold space and recognize that their experience has absolutely nothing to do with me at all? I'm just the avatar that they're playing out their experience with.
Truly.
And then I also get to decide, like, do I want to hold space for this person? There's also this kind of whole, movement that's happening within my community where we feel really responsible for being that for people. And again, integrity, if you can't be that for someone, if you're tired, if you feel that you are overextending yourself because this person needs somebody and you don't actually have the space, but you say yes anyways because you feel like if you don't, they're not going to have anybody else, like, that contradiction is you pretty much, like, you're projecting your experience that the universe doesn't have space and resources in abundance for you, and you're projecting it on the other person. Well, I don't believe the universe has space and abundance and reciprocity for you. So I feel like I have to create that for you.
Yeah.
And if you're saying that to another person, you're saying that about yourself. Like how you believe the universe is open for yourself is how you believe it is for other people, and then vice versa.
The work in the space that was a big concept for me that stood out what you were just talking about. It's like the work creates the space and the space unveils the work.
Yes.
And like I'll share something with you that I think I didn't know about you. I lost my dad 16 years ago. Wow. I was 19 years old. He passed away in 2005. He was everything to me, and that completely rocked my entire existence. And it took me 10 years to get to a point. Well, I was really almost kind of forced to it. Just the trauma and everything began to just manifest in my life in ways that was derailing all aspects of my life. And it took 10 years for me to be forced to create space and forced into the work. And then now I'm going into like year 6 of actually continuously working through it, of continuously facing that box that I didn't want to for many, many years. And as you were talking about the work and the space and the work, that was the best way kind of to describe my experience. As I began to realize this is the work that I need to do, I realized the space that needed to be created in my life, in my relationships, and more importantly, where that space was not. So it showed me areas that needed to be closed off in order for the work to happen, but also where space needed to be created. And also I heard in there of really it's that reciprocity of the people and the space around you that is really going to determine your ability to go through the work, your timeline for said work, if it ever really ends. But within this, like I said, this last 6 years, only within the last year, maybe 18 months, it has, and this is how I know I'm progressing through it, is I can talk about it in a way that it's no longer like an anchor. It's no longer just something keeping me in a past experience or in a deep-rooted past emotion. It is I'm getting a lot more slack, basically, is the best way kind of to describe it. And it is only through the work in the space, the space and the work kind of going off of each other. So I just wanted to share that with you to let you know.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been there, still there, and I do truly think that grief is one of the most significant, most impactful, most hard things someone can go through that creates the most amount of work. Describing grief in general, or just your experience, what is it about grief that just kind of puts up the most amount of work for people?
I love this question because I actually just recommended a book to Caleb.
Oh, no way.
Campbell,
Okay.
because we had a conversation about this. And I read a book that to this day might be my favorite book ever. And it's very unique. It's very tribal. It's called The Smell of Rain on Dust.
Okay.
And it is about duality, which is so perfect because it's about the polarity of grief, which is praise. So the book talks about we are creatures of duality. We are creatures of the masculine and feminine, the yin, the yang, the creator, the performer. We are not separate from it, and we cannot get separate from it, which means that if you are not expressing grief, you are also not expressing its polarity, which is praise and celebration for life. Your inability to acknowledge the pain that was brought by the loss of something is your inability to have actually praised how much you loved that thing.
Wow. Yeah.
And so what we're looking at with war is generational grief that has gone unprocessed. And what we're looking at, like the book talks about so many different things, but it talks about the process of death. And there's this chapter called, it's like Ocean Made of Tears and Canoes Made of Old Souls. And it gives, whether it's an analogy or not, let's just paint the picture that our loved ones, as they pass, they climb into a canoe and they paddle their way across the sea of, the in-between over to the next portal for wherever they're going.
What is it? The river Styx? is it Greek mythology, I think? Or
Maybe, yeah.
yeah.
And the ocean is the tears and the grief that is held for that person's passing. But what propels the canoe is the praise and the acknowledgement and the celebration of life.
Wow.
And so if you look at our society and how we treat funerals, there is no dancing. There is no like in the book it talks about like, imagine if somebody just fell on the ground at a funeral and just it went into the full expression of what grief truly is. There's a story in the book where it talks about a man doing this for his father dying, and that people called an ambulance for him. Because grief is so unacceptable in society to be expressed in its rawest form. I mean, grief is not something where you just silently cry or like the Kim Kardashian cry, where it's like the ugly cry or a pretty cry. It's not that. It's the chaotic cry. It's the grimiest cry that comes from your root chakra and the complete and total disgust of God, of how the fuck could you let this happen and how will I live and move on.
I still to this day have, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
like what you're saying is just like, it's stirring it up. I go back to the moment when I was in the Army. I was home on like emergency leave. The doctors were like, hey, he's got just days left to live. And I spent days at his bedside in the hospital to the point of just sheer exhaustion, no sleep. And I finally went home to go to sleep for a couple hours, and he passed. And when I got that phone call that he had passed, I will never forget the feeling. I've never felt more, the most primal like rage, and just I felt like a hurricane inside of me was pouring out. Like my throat is literally still sore from like the screams and just the belting of that emotion. So like, yes, everything you just said, yes, absolutely.
And it's so interesting. I can't believe we've never talked about this. So I got a call that my dad was going to pass, and I was also there with him when he passed 10 days later.
Wow.
And I wanted to be there when he passed.
Same. Yeah.
My sister did not want to be there. And so I was the only person there when he left. And he was gone long before that because he was so sick. So there's a day where I feel like he died. And then there was 10 days later where his body left, where we finally called it. But yeah, it's just like when I think back to his funeral, I didn't express grief or celebration.
No.
I was stoic as fuck because I could not.
Yeah.
And it was not safe. The people that were there were not safe. They had never been safe because I didn't feel safe within myself. But also there was all these people from my hometown, like that's a long history, and relatives who are pretty dysfunctional in certain ways. And then there's other relatives that are there that are safe havens for me in certain ways, but it's just kind of all over the place. And so there's so much for me that I sit in and I look at. Like I want to create like an altar space, a sacred space where I can have stuff with my dad. And I have so much resistance to doing that because the idea of like really celebrating my dad's life, it's almost like if I don't, I'm just frozen in the illusion that like nothing ever happened. But what's happening with that, what I'm noticing is I'm starting to forget his face because I refuse to remember it. And so you lose a lot when you try to stay in between the comfort zones of like expressing the fullest celebration that you possibly can and the fullest death that you possibly can. And how does this translate to relationships? Why do people break up and they fucking hate each other? Because they can't celebrate the truth of how incredibly beautiful it was.
Yeah.
For the way that it was. Like you loved somebody for 6 years and you're never going to speak to them again. Like that lack of being able to celebrate what was good is the mirror and the reflection for the fact that like you can't truly accept and be in truth about how much it hurts that it's gone.
The more that I stayed in that grief, to your point of like when you break up with somebody, then like you hate them. But like the more I stayed in that grief, it became very, very difficult for me to consciously remember so many memories of like happiness. Your point of the polarity of the praise. And so it was only until finally working through that grief that like, oh no, Chase, like there are 19 years of amazing positive memories that like you've been suppressing by not working on this grief. Like they're in dance. Yeah.
And here's your celebration, like really pulling those in and celebrating it. Like when you do, there really is in that moment, like death is the one thing that brings celebration and grief together. But every single day we have that opportunity. At the end of the day, we all die. We go to sleep. The day is dead. Like we're not getting it back. And then we wake up and we're rebirthed the next morning. Same thing happens in ceremony. Same thing happens when a relationship comes to an end. Same thing happens when a flower dies. Like if you, and I suggest this with my clients all the time, if you have a really poor relationship with grief and with, you know, praise and celebration of your life and cycles and closing of loops and allowing yourself to have a good relationship with life and death, like buy yourself flowers every single week and watch them die. Wow. And then just be sad about the fact that like
experience the life, the good, the beauty, the fading, the death.
Like watch the flower die and rot all the way till it's absolutely nothing. And then go out, bury that flower in the ground, like really pour yourself into that process of life and death and watch how incredibly beautiful it is to witness a flower at every single phase of its existence until it literally has no existence anymore. And then what it brings into your life, like you might love those red roses and then, you know, all of a sudden one day you wake up and it's like, you want daisies. You didn't even know you were going to want daisies, but because you fully fucking enjoyed that red rose every single day that it was there in all of its many shades, you now can come to a place where you can fully let the rose go and move into the next chapter of like, I'm buying daisies for myself. I don't know for how long, but today, like that's what resonates with me. And I can step into this because I fully appreciated and fully celebrated what I had. I did the best that I could. Literally no regrets, where that's the area for me with my dad that is so sticky. I have no regrets in life except for with him.
What do you mean?
How so? I mean, if I look at my life right now, all the relationships that were dysfunctional, the pain, the bullying that I went through, the bullying that I did to other people, the eating disorders, the body dysmorphia, the depression, the anxiety, the lying, the, you know, being in financial stress, like all of those things, I can look back and like, I have no regrets because like I fucking love my life. I love the way that it played out, and me and my friends joke about the writers of our show. Like if we talk about our life being like an 8-season series, like Friends, right? And you know, last week we had the episode of Flat Earth, which was like where all this information about Flat Earth was coming in, and we're like, this is the Flat Earth episode. It's just like happening too randomly, right? But you know, in this scenario, it's just different. So. Yeah, now I'm thinking about Flat Earth. That was a heavy episode.
ADD podcast. Satisfied.
Yeah, ADD podcast. How does that tie in?
It is wild. I mean, grief has been, to kind of like go back to our earlier points, I mean, grief has given me, again, the work in the space. It has shown me the full spectrum of emotions I didn't know possible, of ways to connect to and with myself I didn't know possible. And all the while, what I needed and where I flourished in the working space with other people. And so I always kind of used to think that like in order to get better with other people, you know, you first had to fix yourself. And I think a lot of people would agree. Like, I am not ready for a relationship. I'm not ready for this promotion. I'm not ready to step out into the world because I don't yet quite know the version that the world wants of me. Right?
That is such a rough way to live.
Right?
And you won't be ready. And the idea is that when you go for that promotion, you're not ready. That promotion, but what it does is it provides a new container for you to experience yourself and the shifts that you're going through. It's just reflecting everything to you. So if you're not ready, like it will also reflect that. But what else is reflected is the polarity. It's not just going to reflect to you what you aren't ready for. It's also going to reflect to you things that you are ready for that you had not known because you had not been in an environment that would be reflected to you.
Which is the most powerful, I think, to me.
And everything is polarity. Everything, you're going to have the light and the dark with everything. Every beautiful thing that you do in life, there's going to be some kind of an undercurrent or an attachment or an agenda. And, you know, the more that you can just be in an awareness of that, you know, am I in a state of grief? Am I in a state of avoidance to my grief? You know, which is kind of where I'm at with some of those things with my dad. Or am I in a state of celebration and really calling upon that being able to experience however you want to. It doesn't have to be like I dive into the deepest end of grief and here I am for 6 months just in a deep, dark depression. It's not that. It's like yesterday we went and had breakfast with Aisha.
Yeah.
I just felt really overextended. I was bleeding this week. I came out to California. I'm with my partner and my kind of other partner, and like we're all having a vacation together. And these are two boys that have fucking men that have so much energy. Like one of them, the amount of energy he has, it's sometimes disturbing, but it's also really beautiful. And so they just want to do the things. We're on vacation, like they've gotten off work, like we're out here, and this feeling of like, oh, I want to keep up with you guys. Like, and I just really wanted to go to bed. But two things. I wanted to have these beautiful experiences. I wanted to have this energy. And also, I didn't want them to go have fun without me. Like,
the FOMO.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was going to cry. And I was like, fuck. So we're driving back to the Airbnb. And I'm like, I'm going to cry at any moment. And as soon as I get there, I'm just going to get in bed. I'm just going to spend the rest of the day crying. Like, when have I spent the whole day crying?
Interesting.
Not really. Yeah. Not really ever. So I cry in the car. All of a sudden, I feel incredible. I'm like, all right, now I'm ready to fucking party. Let's go. Wow. And it's just like giving space for me to I just needed to cry. I needed a good cry. And what it was this inner child inside of me that was like, you're compromising. Like, my needs are not met. It's not even that I needed a whole day of rest. My inner child and that part of me needed to know that if I did need rest, I was going to give myself rest rather than compromising and doing what I thought other people wanted or doing it for the wrong reason, for whatever that undercurrent was. Instead, I just needed a little cry, and then my inner child was like, fuck, thank you so much. Now we're back in it, and I had the most incredible energy all day long. Went longboarding for another couple hours, like danced at night, did the whole thing. It's really beautiful to give yourself that space.
You said a word there that I think is really important to address, wrong. Wrong and right and wrong is another kind of, I think, common association people will latch on to when this variety of emotions and the work comes up. The work comes up, we have good, bad associations to them, but how would you advise someone to kind of work past that connotation and really just focus on the neutrality of the emotions, the neutrality of the work, so that anything that we need to work on can be met with the same respect?
I love this. I think the most important mantra that anybody could ever adopt is I am not wrong.
I like that. Okay.
Literally ever. And I write crazy, beautiful mantras all the time. That is the most powerful one for me. And the reason being, when I first got into my spiritual journey, even when I would pray, when I made my relationship back to prayer, intention setting, whatever that word is that really resonates with you, prayer works for me because I've done the healing work that I had from like my past religions or whatever. And so now when I would pray, and this would happen for, at the very beginning, because I didn't have the language, I didn't feel grounded in my practice yet. I would be praying, and then I would be like, fuck, doing this wrong. Like, it would be like, I would literally, I'm like, I don't even know how to, I'm praying wrong.
I've done that so many times.
So I would feel guilty, or I would be doing it like a transmutation meditation where I'm like allowing myself to transmute any energy that like, it doesn't feel good in my field down into the earth. Right. And so I would be like, okay, like earth, like take this. And then I would be like, oh, I don't want you to take this. This is so shitty. And like, I would just be like in this whole, I couldn't even get it.
Can't win.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm just like, oh, I'm not worthy of like doing this. And like, what's so cool about that experience is you're getting to see how you relate to the universe, what you, like your truth of like how worthy or unworthy you feel, how entitled or unworthy you feel about that. Right, yeah. Like if I'm like, yeah, like take all this energy or like whatever that's about, like I can see that and I can sense that. And what would happen is I was calling up like in my partner. I knew I wanted to be in partnership. I was like, I want sacred union. I'm ready to not settle down, but to start settling down in a way. Yeah, so that, in a couple years I can really step into that. And in that process, like getting clear about my boundaries and who I wanted to call in and like doing that whole thing, I'm like in this prayer and I'm like, oh, like, no, that's wrong, cancel. And it just got so like where I was watching my vocabulary and like, oh, I can't say that. That's not what I want. That's not exactly right. That I just was exhausted, and it's less about what's right or wrong because again, we live in the spectrum. Like how you choose, say that you go to a cafe and you're standing in front of the cafe getting ready to get a table and you see this like 80-year-old couple just like snuggling, drinking tea, like kissing, and it's so beautiful, right? And you're like, oh my God, like, isn't the world just such a beautiful fucking place? Meanwhile, if you turn around, you could see a homeless person shooting up directly across the street losing their fucking mind.
Especially here in LA.
With absolutely no resources. They don't have any love. They don't even have a dog. And you think to yourself, the world is an ugly place. Same moment, same place, same everything.
Wow.
Truth is completely relative.
Happening all at the same time.
It's a complete and total perspective. Everything is happening. Murder is happening, death is happening, rape is happening, celebration is happening, love is happening, dancing is happening, all at the same time, all at once, everywhere. So how you choose to engage with the world and how it really resonates with you, like finding that truth, you're not wrong. You just might not be in alignment with your truth.
Right, right.
So like for me, canceling the idea that like, oh, this is wrong, like I'm not doing this right. Like if you could really do better, you would, but you can adopt this idea that's like, I'm not wrong. And I always say that. I say this every single day to myself. I'm not wrong, but I do feel that there's something that's a little bit more aligned, you know?
Yes, well said, yeah.
And so when you find that, it allows you to see on the spectrum of like, oh, I'm closer to my truth, which is way fucking better than like, nope, I'm wrong. This is not right. Because then it's like, how many no's do you have to get to a yes?
Truly,
is how many no's do you have to get before you get closer to a yes? Where you actually are able to, and every single like thing that you're saying no to along the way allows you to have more clarity and to define a little bit more what is in more alignment. So again, it's just a dance of like engagement, like how you're interpreting something like, oh, that feels really good. I'm going to create space to continue searching for this. I'm not attached to that one thing. I'm going to allow myself to like keep going because maybe I like this person 80% of the way, or I like this idea 80% of the way, or I like this truth 80% of the way. Like I really believe this, but there's just something that isn't quite hitting.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And if your truth is something that's really fucking ugly that you don't actually resonate with, it's not your truth, but it's actually someone else's. So it's not wrong either. It's just misplaced.
Exactly. Yeah, that hits home for me so hard. A part of all of my work over the years has been a facing, a coming to terms, a questioning of so many seasons, versions, boxes of my life that I've been in, of growing up in a very, very religious part of the world and religious household and kind of sheltered in a way, and then stepping into the military, and then stepping out into being a civilian again, and then, just going through so many different seasons of life. And when I look back to the concept of right and wrong, one of the biggest realizations I had was it was just the place that I was at, the people that I was around, that container, they deemed it right and wrong. Mm-hmm. But then I can step out of one container and go into another. I can go from literally one job to another. I can go from one community to another. And what was wrong over here is right over here. Mm-hmm. So then this whole concept of right and wrong became very, very clear to me, of just, no, as long as I am, again, is this in alignment for my path? Am I doing the work? It's not right or wrong. It's just, am I basically in alignment with integrity, with the work that I want to do, the path I want to carve, the life I want to live, the example I want to set. And one of the things, to kind of bring full circle to the work with my father, that I think solidified things the most for me was I had one of my first Psilocybin experiences like last summer, and something came up, and I was with a community of very trusted people that I felt very safe and loved. And then something came up that reminded me about, like, would my dad, like, am I doing the wrong thing? Like, past experiences, childhood, especially religion, is what I'm doing, is this right or wrong? And I literally got up and I had to leave to go to the end of the backyard, and I had this incredible inner monologue with myself of walking through so many past experiences of when I would get in trouble, or just conversations with my dad. And it all landed back to, no matter what happened to me as a kid, no matter what I did, if I fucked up in school, if I failed a test, or if I excelled, or whatever happened, no matter what, my dad was always like, did you give it your all? Are you doing the right thing? And he's like, Chase, I don't care if you failed the test or you get the home run derby award in baseball. Like, did you enjoy what you were doing? Are you helping other people? Like, do you feel good about it? Is it in alignment with your integrity?
And your desires.
Exactly.
Too.
Exactly.
Yeah, not just do you feel like you did the right thing,
but
like, do you feel like you did the right thing? And it also matches up with your desire.
100%.
And what's so cool is like that dialogue that you had with your dad. If somebody's listening and they're like, that was not my fucking dialogue with my dad. Okay, just have the dialogue with yourself.
Yeah.
Just become that voice. Ask yourself those exact same questions. And there are these pillars, you know, it's like integrity comes from, it's internal, it's in the inner work. Like, I am not in integrity if I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, and I know that if I do this thing, Chase is going to approve. That's not integrity. That's not integrity, because that's me compromising on who knows what my truth would be for this idea that you're going to like it, and your validation matters to me more than my own internal dialogue. And we have to reparent ourselves for that reason, because whether our parents gave us that, like my parents, and it sounds like both of our dads were very similar, which is so cool, or you didn't have that dialogue, you know, adopting that dialogue and allowing yourself to get rid of any kind of vocabulary that is in the box of like what is right and wrong, and giving up like that old toxic masculine way, which is all about like black and white, you know, it's saying like it's either this or it's that, and it's not. It's
so not.
It's this and it's that, and it's every single thing that exists between this and that is truth, and your relative truth cannot be discerned from an outside perspective. It cannot be discerned from any stories that you have about what other people told you was in alignment. Like, alignment is like, in alignment, when I think of alignment, I literally think of your spine, all of your chakras, and how they engage with energy that is being transmitted from them and is being receptive to them. And if you do not feel all of your chakras, all of your energy centers, meaning like if your gut health is off, if your memory is off, if you have a hard time speaking up, if your heart is closed, if you constantly give your power away, if you're in constant states of fear over money or, you know, where you're going to get your next meal from, then you are not aligned. Your spine, the most straight up and down aligned channel in the entire body that extends us from the heavens to the earth, if that is not lit up with health and positivity and energy and fluidity, you're not aligned. And you can ask yourself, what makes me feel better? And in that moment, it doesn't always mean it's a salad. Like, that's just an analogy for the food. But like, what about people who don't break down oxalates? Cool, like, you're going to eat a salad and you're going to get constipated, whereas I eat a salad and I feel fantastic. There's not a truth. Just like with nutrition, there's not one truth.
Truly,
It's completely and totally relative. There's so many things that go into play for why somebody would eat the way that they eat. And nobody can really tell them what's right or wrong. It's their own internal experience. And again, like, checking in with everything. So when I have health issues, that is always going to be the first sign that there's something out of alignment. Of course, you can check physically, like, did I eat a lot of gluten like this week, and like, you know, I've having a little bit of inflammation, or if I've been on flights too much or whatever. But if I'm doing all the right things and I'm having serious gut issues, like, I healed my endometriosis through understanding what was existing in these lower energy centers in my body and how they were transmitting and taking on information, and like what was being repressed. You know, for me, it was grief from my dad's death. It was also anger, mostly. Because the thing that I wasn't processing, that the grief is existing underneath, was the anger. So it started showing up in my womb space, in my sex organs, in my stomach. Well, those are my lower chakras. So what do those energy points represent as far as alignment goes? Like survival. My dad was the survival point for me. He was the one who I knew was never going to tell me no. I got all my needs met through this person, and this person was financially responsible for me. When he died, my root chakra, it was within 6 months that I started getting autoimmune symptoms severely. And a lot of that was the absolute fear that I couldn't survive on my own, which translated to, let me go find men who are going to take care of me, right? Did that dance for a couple of years, which that's definitely not in alignment. That's not me and my truth. That's me like manipulating and trying to be taken care of in some way, whether I'm conscious of it or not. Most of us are not conscious of how our codependent energy naturally moves. You know, but for me, when he was gone, it was like my root chakra shut down, all of that. And then the anger that I felt towards God, which was very confusing because it's like that scene in Bruce Almighty, like who screams like, smite me, almighty spider, you know, like I remember like friends doing that as a joke sometimes. And you're always like, oh my God, because you're, you know, co-creator with the universe, you start realizing like, you don't want to talk like that. But if I have really unprocessed anger towards even one person, it's also towards the universe. It's towards everything. It's like, what is the bigger fucking picture here and who's responsible for this? And if I can't blame this person because it's their trauma, then whose fucking fault is it? And if you're not asking that question, if you have a feeling that like, who's at fault? And that's not a dialogue that you naturally can like bring up and recognize, oh my God, I'm a co-creator. Like, here's where my ownership is. Here's also, you know, things that are out of my hands. And like, you're able to weigh the duality of an experience. Then you have repressed, unprocessed anger towards something that is very ambiguous. That's going to lead to a complete and total lack of safety in your field. You are not going to feel safe in a universe where you don't even feel like you can look at the universe and go, what the actual fuck is going on? What is this? And I do not like this at all. And when I'm teaching like about boundaries, boundaries are not about you keeping another person far away from you or separate from you. They're about keeping you close enough to yourself that you can really, truly do the dance with the universe, every single other person, and feel safe to do so. And you have the right to communicate with everything around you of what you are not available for. Like, exactly. That's why setting intentions in plant medicine ceremonies is so fucking important. Yeah. Because if you're just like, whatever, I'm available for anything. What is anything? First of all, you don't even know what everything is, you know, but if you say like, hey, I'm not available to experience something that's going to make me feel like I lost my mind and I will feel less safe in my body than I feel now. I'm not available for that. What I am available for is to have a transcendent experience that allows me to feel more connected to myself while remaining grounded in who I already am. And that's really important to have before you go into a plant medicine ceremony. You better know who you are. That's the difference between faith and a belief. A belief can just be fucking sliced right through by information, science, whatever. But faith of whatever it is that you know, like I know my relationship with the universe, with God, with source, with honestly, I don't even really need a word for it because that's how deeply rooted I am. Wow, okay. When I go into plant medicine ceremonies, if I experience something that takes me really, really far away from that belief, I typically know that I'm probably sitting too close to someone in ceremony and I'm experiencing some stuff that they're experiencing. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Right. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. If that's your truth, that's your truth. I just know what mine is. I know how I choose to engage with the universe. I know how I choose to interpret it. That is my sovereign choice. And as I move to that choice, you're doing the dance of free will. We all know that we came here with free will. Even everyone that's like, you know, Christians, religion, like we came here with choice. But the moment that we actually move into free will is the moment that we transcend the idea that somehow the universe is creating our reality for us without our permission, when really we are the co-facilitators of that. And once you step into that space, you start really living from free will, then you're able to say like what you are and are not available for, and having boundaries with yourself and keeping yourself close to yourself so that you have the space to explore how you want to engage and how you've been engaging in the past that led you to not feel safe, that led you to abandon yourself. Like that process is the healing work. How powerful is that? It's unreal. Everything. Unreal. It will change everything. One pattern. I mean, you think about it, like think of one person in your life that from the day you met them, it course corrected you. It changed the course of your life. Like just one person. It could have been somebody you've never even met in person, like on a podcast. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If all it takes is one person to completely redirect your life, that person is really just a mirror of all the ideas about yourself that you've projected onto them and how you interpret the world through them. That's it. Which means all you're doing is taking your own thoughts and your own interpretations, throwing them in the direction of a person, and creating a reality about who that person is.